And we are back, the fitness podcast, and it's me, Nathan, here, whilst we discuss and meet another guest coming onto the podcast. I'm not going to say what episode it is because I'm being completely honest, I don't know when it's going to come out. So this will come out when it does. We have Elliott here, a really, really good friend of mine, but an absolutely fantastic coach. He runs a podcast. Very, very well. He helped me so much in the past in terms of keeping myself grounded and asked me very, very deep questions. We've traveled a bit together, and yeah, plenty of insights coming into this podcast. So, hey, Elliott, how's it going?
It's very well. Thank you for having me, Nate. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to having another deep conversation. I'm sure that's where it will go.
Yeah. What's it like being interviewed as opposed to being the interviewer at the moment?
Yeah, it's quite nice, actually. I feel like, usually when I go into podcasts where I've got a guest, I'm like, there's an agenda, I've done all my research. So yeah, to be interviewed, I just like rocked up. All I needed to do was have a coffee. So it's a lot easier being on this side of it.
Yeah, I can imagine you're just like, okay, well, whatever questions we ask, we'll just make it up anyway. Whereas you have to steer the conversation a little bit on this side. Well, kind of.
Yeah, I think it's because it's you as well. It's just like, it's just like having a conversation with Nathan. So I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, if we would have recorded all our conversations in all of the places that we've been, we'd probably make a very, very top selling podcast.
I don't think you're wrong there. There's been some great analogies to go with it as well. Like salt and pepper grinder comes to mind.
The salt and pepper grinder, yeah, that was the Barcelona salt and pepper. That was a deep time for both of us.
A very, very deep topic. I'm just trying to, we need to write these down or at least record them. So hopefully this is the start of acts of, I'm going to start journaling. Every time I think of it now, I'm going to put down one.
Yeah, maybe we'll get to that salt and pepper. I'm not sure. So because we are the fitness podcast and we will always start with this with our guests, what does fitness mean to you?
That's a very good question. It's one that I actually haven't pondered too much, but I guess it's something that's evolved for me throughout the years. I think when I first begun my journey, fitness was more of like, okay, this is my avenue to get out of the place that I don't like being. And I was very self-conscious as a very young teenager. Like, I don't know how many people I've told the story to, but my journey began because of, I would be in the school changing rooms. I would go into the toilet cubicles to go change my t-shirt because I was self-conscious. And that was at the age of like 13, 14. So that's where it all began. And then fitness was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I have this influence over my body, and I could change the way I look and the way I feel. And then obviously nutrition then tied into that as well. But then I started going to the gym, absolutely loved doing that. Like, it was just, I was hooked from day one. I was the guy who spent like maybe 3 hours in there, right? I would go in and do like a 60-minute bout of cardio. Like, I would spend like an hour on the cross trainer, aim to burn like 600 calories. And then I'd get off, do a weight session, finish off with some abs, and then make my way home. Like, the gym instructors were in there like, do you not have somewhere to be? And I was just like, I just loved it. Yeah. So that's where it begun. And then obviously the knock-on effect of that, of like being in better shape, doing something that, the kids at my age weren't doing it, right? Like, everyone was hanging around, prior to that, I'd hang around with the school gates and my friends, you wouldn't make it home till like 5, 6 p.m. You'd mess around on social media, whatever the social media was at the time, and then you would go to bed, right? And repeat. Whereas, when it started for me, I rushed off from school, like skipped the school gates, went straight to the gym. So yeah, I kind of had a newfound confidence. It's like, oh, this is my thing. So it became something that like gave me confidence, boosted my morale and everything like that. And it was nice to have that about myself. And then as it's evolved, I feel like today it's just something that grounds me. It's just something that's stable in my life. It's something that I can't see myself living without. And through the journey of training, like I think we discussed before, like it's become less about developing my physique, but it's more of like a self-mastery thing, right? Now it's more like going in and just making sure that my technique is on point. I'm growing and progressing as a person. Like, I find it very hard to just go to the gym and maintain. So now it's, it's that form of progression that I have in my life at all times, no matter what else is going on.
That makes sense. We were recently talking on a podcast with Kunal and Emily, and they were speaking about the meditative effects of resistance training. Do you find that within your sessions too, or are you more of a not?
Yeah, so I can't actually resonate with this, to be completely honest. Like, I wouldn't say that I have the meditative effects of it. Like, my meditation practice and my training, they're very, very different. I get where everyone is coming from when they mention those things. But no, I wouldn't say so. I'd say it gives me something different. Do you find that?
No, I really, really suck. I find that in the moment that I lift the heavy weights or whatever it is, I'm so focused on trying to manage all of those variables that it can't be peaceful because I'm trying to attack something and I'm trying to push through it. And whilst if you let go, you can feel that. But I feel that by letting go, you actually won't get stronger because there's a level of like, you can get peaceful, but self-talk is massive. And
there's like internal coaching going on, right? Like when you're going through a lift, like especially a heavy one, you are talking yourself through, well, I am anyway, I'm talking myself through every single rep. So there's no peace or inner silence. It's all like very analytical and so that's why I don't get that, because of, meditation practice for me is far from analytical, right? That is about letting go for me.
Yeah. I think also because you have those two practices, which we'll talk about and go into that in a minute, but you have them separate, right? So it's not like it's your one thing, because we know clients and know people that have that as their one thing. They've probably got like 2 hours in the day outside of family, and that 1 hour is going to be spent lifting. Sure, probably potentially those people might feel that because they haven't got the get the variation or the contrast of what meditation is and then what lifting is, and there's a blend. And I think you do find a blend if you're probably not training that hard. Now I'll call out Emily out for that and Kunal out for that. But like if you're not training that hard, then there will, because pain threshold goes up as you go into those latter parts of the set. More accumulation of motor unit recruitment and pain will accumulate over time. So yes, if you can stay peaceful in those moments of high levels of threshold, that's great from a mindset perspective, but there's got to be the want to drive further forwards. And I don't think you get as far as you could do is the biggest thing if you were to have the self-talk of performance-related self-talk.
Yeah, no, agreed. And with that being said as well, I've seen how you trained back in the day. Maybe I'm not sure where you're at right now, but if I look back to some of seeing your like RDL videos, like we're very similar in the sense that like I want to be amped up as like I possibly can. And to be honest, like again, I've got auto regulation and how amped up I allow myself to be. But I want to be going hard, like in my head, in my mind, in my mentality. And that's the furthest away from stillness that I could possibly think of. So yeah, I think if you train quite aggressively, which like, in my rest periods, I'm super calm and I'm, I might be even smiley, but during the set, like, it's game time.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. Like, I think I did have a period of where I would make it a little more trancy, but that was because I was listening to like a 2-hour drum code house music set, and I wasn't looking at my logbook to look at progressions. I was thinking more about volume and just getting the work done, as opposed to progressing it at the rate that I could have. Just constantly giving 80%, as opposed to going to those thresholds, those upper echelons of things, and that probably did give me some level of relaxation, but I was also training on my own at that time as well. Now I train with a training partner. There's no way you get away with an 80% set with my training partner and navigate that. So
no, yeah, and I think there's benefits to taking, a bit more of I don't want to call it coasting. Again, I'm just being mindful of the fact that Emily Hansoon, like I've seen Em train and she trains pretty intensely. So, but I think there is benefits to taking that, because you can't be 100% aggressive with everything. And I think that's why during top sets and everything like that, I will have that mentality. But in my rest periods, it's like, okay, how quickly can I down regulate so that I'm not like just like wiped mentally and physically after my session.
Yeah, 100%. And I noticed that you didn't mention that Kunal trained hard, because we know about Kunal's 7 reps.
Yeah, Emily, I can back K-Mac. Sorry, dude.
Yeah. Going on from that, let's talk about your, like, to be honest, a lot of my actually we spoke about journaling in the last podcast with Em and Kunal. We spoke about meditation and all these variables, but like for the most part, my interactions with you has been one of learning those variables. We've spoke about it, you've encouraged it, everything that you've kind of done and progressed through from your own self-development, I've kind of mirrored, because I've seen the way that you've progressed and how you've handled those situations. And I would love to be like you in those scenarios, which is fair play. So I did what you did, because that's how you do. You just copy other people until you find your own way. So you showed me a lot of my practices that I have today and the people that I speak to daily or weekly. How did you come about utilizing those practices, and then what are you utilizing currently for the listeners to kind of take away and maybe try?
First of all, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm glad they've helped you just as much as they've helped me. Because that's the thing, right? I think when you get into any type of hobby, journey, like a health and fitness journey, for instance, you want to share it with everyone because you're like, it works so well for me. Do it. And like only half the people you say actually do it, or even not even half, to be honest. Maybe 1% of people will do it, and you're like, yes, and then they get it. So like you're a perfect example of that. So I first came across it when it was actually off the back of when I wasn't in that good of a place. So if we scale back to 2017, so I had my first hypnotherapy session then, and then it all came after that. But funnily enough, I had meditation apps on my phone prior to that, but I'd never even opened it. Like I had the Calm app on my phone in like 2016, but I just didn't see the need to open it. Yeah. And then mental health took a bit of a hit. Decided to get hypnotherapy. And then when I was looking into like the next stages of like, okay, well, I've dug deep into all this stuff that I need to deal with. How do you go through the process of rebuilding? And then every time I looked into any, article, spoke to anyone who doing any type of personal development, meditation was top of the list, journaling was there, affirmations were there. And I was thinking, I've always got these physical foundations in place. I train well, I eat well, I sleep well. And now I need to, discover these new things. So I downloaded Headspace, in September of like 2017. It was like a 3-minute initial meditation. And I was just like, and I think what was good is I was always already conditioned to know that with training, it's not an immediate result. It's just like the compound interest. So I applied that exact same mentality to meditation. So it wasn't like I was expecting anything from it.
Yeah, straight away.
And it was just a daily, let me get this into a daily habit because I've heard so many good things about it. And, there's even science behind it, right? And if there's science behind it, then we can get behind it. And then, over the course of months and months, I just continued to meditate, brought it up to about 10 to 15 minutes. Had my journaling practices in place and everything like that. And then the first time I realized the power of it, like I obviously felt myself being a little bit more, upbeat, a little bit more conscious, let's say. And I feel like, I think the most important thing to say is meditation allowed me to realize that there was a gap between me and my thoughts. I was not the things that I was thinking. And I had the space in between to then choose what I wanted to think and do. So with that being said, I went through a period where I didn't meditate. And then all of a sudden I was just like, God damn, my mind is noisy. Like all these thoughts I don't like, they're all in my head. Like what's going on here? But what I realized is that's probably everyone's baseline prior to doing any meditation, right? Like it's always the same as the health and fitness, right? You don't know how bad your sleep and your nutrition and how you feel on a day-to-day basis is until you know what good feels like, right? And everyone's operating in this unconscious, I'm going all over the place in my mind and my thoughts until they meditate. And then I was just like, then I had this perspective of like, oh, right, like this is the other side of it. And then it made me realize, okay, meditation is like a really important part. Whereas with journaling, I can back off journaling for months and I'm okay. But with meditation, it's the permanent fixture in my life. Otherwise, things are going to go sideways.
Yeah. As you said, then the biggest point about that is that you don't know how shit you're feeling until you feel good. And then 2 is that you have that gap between, it's response, it's an input and output, right? That's what whatever it is, consciousness, awareness, whatever you want to call it, is the thing. It's the gap between the input and the output being more towards the way that you want to be, as opposed to a reactive thought process.
1000%. Hit the nail on the head. And that's exactly it. And not only do you have the space, like you cultivate more space, right? And I can't explain it in like physical terms, but it's almost, and I think the best way to sell this to someone is like, if you ever said something to someone, you're like, it comes out your mouth before you even think about it. Like you don't do that quite as much, or you have a space to think about it, and then you choose what the better response is. So it saves so many arguments. It doesn't mean you put your foot in your mouth like more times than often. So that's like the biggest selling point for me. Like if you want less arguments with your partner, then start meditating.
There you go. The relationship guru number 1.
Yeah, exactly. Learn their love languages and start meditating and you'll be fine.
There you go. There's the new calling of the EH coaching.
Yeah, we'll have a relationship side note there.
Well, to be honest, everything that we do does bleed into that, right? You normally do end up getting better or more consciously aware of the choices you're making, which then impacts other people that you're around as well.
Totally. And I think it's worth noting that, once you start, and again, I'm not some enlightened being, like I've not gone to an ashram in India and spent 12 years being a young monk. Like I'm just someone who's meditated on a day-to-day basis. And because the baseline is so low and everyone's so ran by their own thoughts, when you're just a little bit above, when you've actually made a bit of effort with your personal development, then you actually have like a little bit more awareness. And I think that's what you realize then is the people around you, especially people close to you, you start to see from like a slightly different level, and you're like, oh, the world around you looks differently. The way you behave and move in the world looks differently. And guess what? People don't like change. And so if they see you changing and operating in a different way, coming back to the salt and pepper grinder, either they're going to come with you, or they're going to, let's say that and we're going to give you the analogy now, we have to, right? So what Nathan came up with, and I'm going to give you this because this was yours, is there's a salt and pepper grinder. Just imagine they're next to each other, but they're attached by string. If one goes ahead, right, that string has only got so much tension with it, and the other stays in place, but the other one keeps going ahead, it's going to be tight. There's going to be tension on that string. The pepper or whoever's going forward can catch up, with the one who's going forward, and you can push on and grow together. However, the pepper can stay where it is, or even backtrack whilst the other one's going forward, and eventually that string is going to snap, right? And that's kind of the difference in terms of like you said, it influences the relationships around you. And if you are moving differently in the world, then you'll find that a lot of the different relationships you have might not have been as strong as if you kind of both stayed where you were.
Yeah, 100%. I love that. I love that analogy. And it's the element of like two things that do complement each other, but they only complement each other at that moment in time, that space in time, because it's like at that snapshot, at that moment, 2019, end of 2019, you're feeling like this, your priorities are like this, your values are like this, your headspace is like this. Someone else, deal the pepper, you're the salt, comes over, they match those things. In a year's time, that salt may change because change is change. And you evolve, and therefore the salt moves inch further. The tension between the two salt and peppers get a little bit too tense, and therefore one is going in one direction, one is going in the other. They ultimately complement each other, and they have to kind of come together as condiments to work as best as you can. But the problem is that when there's tension between the two condiments, it creates that gap, and that you can't use them if they're, it doesn't work.
To take this analogy further, like just imagine putting too much salt on a dish or too much pepper on a dish, right? Like it just doesn't work. So eventually something has to give. And I don't know where we were going with that, but
it's the balance of the salt and the pepper that is the key. Enough salt on a meal and enough pepper on a meal makes the meal much better. The meal on its own could be and fine as it is, and the salt can be as fine as it is, and the pepper on its own can be as fine as it is. But together, that's where the complement really does work its true magic. But they can't if they're so far from each other.
Exactly.
So moving on from our relationship advice, what gets you up in the morning?
My alarm, usually.
Well, that's what people said. That's what people said. If we get one more person saying that, I'm asking the question a different way.
No, I'm kidding. I'm definitely, I know a lot of people who do wake up without alarms. I'm definitely not one of those people. But yeah, in the sense of your question, like I have a very clear look at my day. Like I understand what I'm getting up for in the morning, and don't get me wrong, it's not always been easy to have that driving force in my life, like to want to get out of bed and jump out of bed. And at this moment in time, you are fortunately speaking to me in a very good time. I feel like I'm in a very good space at the moment. So it's quite easy for me to get out of bed. I'm very excited about what I do. Like I have not only like personal goals in terms of my own personal development, my development with my training, my health and fitness, my relationships, but I have my purpose as well, right? Which is what I do on a day-to-day basis with my coaching team, what I do with the podcast. And every single morning I get up, there's always something that I get to do for that day. And I recently had an Instagram story where I said, I don't have a to-do list, I have a get to do list. Like it's things that I get to do, and I'm privileged to do those. So I always remind myself that. So when I get up in the morning, it's a case of like, I go through the motion of my morning routine, but then it's like my schedule's already laid out. And then I put down my list of what's to do in the day. And it's really not hard to fill that. So it's very easy for me to get up in the morning and actually feel good about getting up in the morning as well, because of I like what I do and I feel like it's purposeful and adds meaning to my life.
That's fairly Fairly great.
Trust me, like, I mean, you're speaking to me at a good time, and it's not always been like this. There's been times where, I'll get, I mean, I'm very good at showing up, but it's a difference. There's a difference between just showing up and really turning up, right? And I've been showing up for a long time just to put the reps in, but now I'm turning up, and that's the difference because of, there's been many times in my life up until this point where I've just done it because of maybe even just guilt, maybe just knowing that it feels like I should be doing it, but not truly wanting to. Whereas right now we are in a place where I do truly want to, but like I said, I don't want to speak as if like I'm in this place where I've done this for the last 15 years of my life. It's like very new in terms of the passion in which I can attack it at.
Yeah. Do you think that the level of purpose, the level of drive that you can facilitate will ultimately depend on how much bandwidth that you're able to give, dependent on the place that you're in mentally and from a mindset perspective? Do you feel that there's a large correlation between the times that you have more meditation, more mindfulness, more self-development, and the times that you also then are able to give more to this specific entity that you wake up for?
1000%, dude. If we do just backtrack to 6 months ago, I was in a pretty challenging place with my mental health again, if I'm completely honest. And this is the flip side of the story. And what was taking the majority of the bandwidth was the negative thoughts in my mind. It was anxiety. It was all these things that I didn't want to be. And just showing up and keeping my face the way it needs to be so I can serve my clients and make the impact I want to make was incredibly exhausting, right? And I would struggle to train effectively. I would struggle to be happy on a day-to-day basis. I would struggle to do anything for myself. So actually, just I had a very limited amount of bandwidth. Unfortunately, I still knew that was a priority, so I placed the majority of my energy there, but I didn't really actually have energy for anything else. So now I'm in a place where I am prioritizing my self-care. I think ultimately I understand my priorities as well. I know that I don't work in the same way as everyone. I'm very, I don't want to say single-minded, but I'm very single-minded when it comes to my work and the stuff that I do. And I'm very low maintenance when it comes to friendships and stuff like that, as you know. But I know that my priorities stand in that place, but I also know I'm giving enough to those other areas of my life so it doesn't become all-encompassing. But yeah, 1000%.
Yeah, do you think that people will? This is where a lot of people will bleed a lot of unhappiness, discontent, and uncertainty from, because maybe they don't know their values or priorities, but equally they don't know how much to give to each of the buckets that they're trying to put water into.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And once again, I think it might have even been you who gave me this analogy that I always use, which is it was, you can't turn every single ring on the gas cooker up, right? You've only got so much gas to give. And I think quite often the reason why people are so frustrated is because they try to give their all to everything and they just can't. There is probably going to be the 2% of people in the world that actually may have a capacity of doing that. But most of us, probably myself included, cannot do that. So we are constantly trying to push, fill all these buckets or turn up the gas on all these rings. In reality, we're just, not giving as much as we could to any of them and not really getting the fulfillment out of any of them. And I've definitely been in that place before. And yeah, like I like to say to people, I was like, you can do everything you want to, but you can't do all at once. So, I think what you've just said is that it comes back to understanding your priorities, understanding your value, understanding your bandwidth and what's going on in your world right now, and then focusing and putting your energy in that area. And just being okay with it being for a phase of your life. I'm very aware that in 5 years' time, I might not be as work driven, and that's okay because I might have a family which will take priority. But for this phase of my life, I've determined that this is important. So I place as much of my energy into those buckets as possible. And like I said, friendships and other things, they take a bit of a backseat, which I'm sorry to everyone who's in my WhatsApp inbox who it doesn't get a reply from me in 3 months. But actually, speaking of KMAC, I opened one of his voice messages and it was like, you are no longer able to open this voice message. Please get the sender to resend it. Because I think I hadn't opened it in like 3 months or something like that. So sorry, K-Mac.
What's the process of managing or finding out those high level of priorities? Like, how do you know at that moment in time that that priority is real, or it's just a environmental factor, or like, you know, just because you got loads of people around you, like you got loads of, let's say for example, if you were around about 3 to 5 friends and you see them regularly, how do you know that's actually a priority versus just your environment feeding you the information?
That's a really good question. It's a really good question. And I would argue that everyone deep down kind of knows what they should be doing, right? Like, you know, when you're alone by yourself in the evening, at night, you will know whether you like who you're being with. You will know if you're placing your energy and all your resources in the right place. And it's hard because of, like you said, your environment is extremely impactful. And to then step away from that environment, especially if these are close friends and family members, you might no longer be part of that tribe, right? Which is an uncomfortable place to be. So what I would do first is I would assess your responsibilities, right? The things that you've found yourself, you know, with in your life right now. Like if you have children, your child kind of has to be a priority, right? And so yeah, responsibilities are first. What is currently in your life? Like I'm fortunate enough to, like, you know, my business is probably one of my biggest responsibilities. I don't have kids and stuff like that. And then from there, I would say, what's causing you the most pain, right? Like, you know, for most people who start a health and fitness journey, it's as a byproduct of feeling like, you know, not good in their health, you know, not good on a day-to-day basis, getting that message from the doctor, you know, saying they're borderline diabetes or whatever like that. So what's causing you the most pain? And then I think finally it comes down to like, what's got the biggest return on investment that's going to help me in these other areas, right? So that's the beautiful thing about physical health and wellness, is that that's a very good foundation to build other things off. And let's say you wanted to start a business, it might be better if you just like go double down on your health and wellness for 6 months, operate from a much better baseline, because your business is probably going to be better as a byproduct of you looking at those things, right?
Yeah.
So I think it all comes down to that. And then ultimately there will be a lot of discontent. Like if you find yourself in the evenings, you're binging on Netflix, you're binging on food and stuff like that, there's some dissatisfaction there. And you just need to listen to that rather than going for the cookie jar, putting on the next episode, and like listen to what it's actually saying to you, which is uncomfortable AF, but required.
That 100% true, 100% true. Here's a question then. You mentioned about wanting to, when you're alone in the evenings. No one really is truly alone, because normally that phone or that other person in the room is always going to be there, right? How can they disassociate to ensure that they know that that's what they're feeling and that's what they're thinking, as opposed to the other person in the room or the family that are in the room or the people that are on that phone? How do you learn to make that scenario? Like, let's say for example, even myself, the last 6 days I've probably been in the evening once on my own. The rest of the time either with family or on the phone to someone or sales calls or whatever, like, you know, and it's till bed, or just till before bed. How do you distinguish or get that time?
I think you have to prioritize the form of solitude, right? I think it's extremely undervalued, but time with yourself is incredibly important. I'm probably someone who spends maybe a little bit too much time with myself. However, it can be incredibly valuable, and you have to prioritize it and carve it out, because of 9 times out of 10, if you are living with a partner or something along those lines, you will be massively influenced by their thoughts and their feelings, which, you know, when they're lifting you up, amazing. But if they're not in a good place either, it can be pretty catastrophic for both of you. So I think it really comes down to carving out that time and then having a reflective practice like meditation and journaling in your life, right? Because if you do carve out 10 minutes in the day and you actually sit with your thoughts, and that's a dedicated time to do that, you're going to hear some stuff, right? And you're not, you know, if you're in the middle of meditation, you're not going to go sit up and go grab a cookie. And then when it comes to journaling, same thing, right? If you start writing out what's on your mind and you see what's coming out on paper, you can reflect on that and determine whether you like what it says or not. But yeah, you can be heavily influenced. I mean, you know, if you really want to go as far as just like maybe, you know, find some you time in terms of like, you know, post-COVID time, go take a solo holiday, you know, spend a night away from your partner. Like those things can be done. But I think you have to make it a priority.
Yeah. And often the moving away will then lead to that whole salt and pepper analogy. Potentially,
Well,
anyway.
yeah, potentially. And I mean, if those around you are willing, like there's no reason why the salt and pepper can't move forward together, right? But you know, it might make you realize that, oh, actually, you know, we're salt and pepper grinder, but one of us is Le Creuset and the other one is completely different, right? You didn't have the matching grinders. And so, you know, you might have to find another grinder, or you might just have to, you know,
go on grinder.
Huh?
You might have to go on grinder.
But no, that's a reality bit, right? Like, you know, you can go forward together, but you might actually realize you're not even the right match, you know, and that's with friends, that's with partners, that's with maybe even family. And that doesn't mean you have to break up or cut ties or everything. You just might have to disassociate or spend a little less time around these people.
Yeah. Yeah. But often hard in the journey for self-mastery, or this journey of being with yourself and knowing yourself, you almost have to move away from others to establish that control, which you're very good at. And then you can move back into those scenarios at the rate in which you choose to. Like for me, I don't really choose to go in many social situations that are large groups. I really struggle. I don't really like them. We're very similar on that one, right? We're just like, we get into those large scenarios and we're like, well, this is shit. Or like, I don't want to make small talk with someone that I don't actually want to have a conversation with. Like, I'll have a drink with you, we'll have a conversation, but I actually really hate it. Yeah. And then, but like, and I've only known that from being in lots of social scenarios and feeling very, very like I'd want to run in the opposite direction, not wanting to open up, and then being like, okay, let me take myself out of it, and not seeing anybody for a long time, and be realized, no, I like some communication on a one-to-one basis, but group stuff, then no. I'll go, but I'll leave early for the most part.
And I mean, there you go.
No, I was just saying that we're very similar on that one, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best thing about that is you have the self-awareness to realize. I think probably a lot of people spend time in social scenarios, spending time with people they don't like, you know, trying to impress other people with all these things and the way they behave, when in reality, they don't actually care. You know, they're just wanting to be part of the tribe because that's completely normal. And actually taking that step back can be very lonely. And that's the reality of the situation. And when you do come back to those social scenarios, like you said, it can be quite uncomfortable because of you might not be as well accepted into that group, or you might not find, you're like, oh, well, this was really fulfilling before, but now I don't even really care. So you've just got to establish like what's enough. And like, again, for both of us in particular, like I can show up and I can do the small talk thing, but I'm going to be very mindful of how much I do that because I know that it doesn't align with my values. And I know that I can't just start a conversation and go, hey, what do you think the meaning of life is? Like, I know that that's socially awkward. So like, I think if you have a couple of people who are on similar journeys to you, you know, fortunately, you know, you can dive in with those questions and not just say, how are you? But like, really, how are you doing?
How are you?
Yeah, exactly. And like get into that right away. But you have to recognize that unless you attract that type of tribe and you intentionally disassociate yourself with, you know, the tribe of people that you don't really fancy being around, then it's not going to happen, right? Your environment is what you cultivate.
Yeah. And it's the often trying to fit into all crowds leads you fitting into none.
Yep, exactly. And there's nothing worse than, like, again, like going to doing these things, attending these events, feeling like you're not fitting in, but actually deep down knowing that, oh, actually I'm not supposed to fit in here, right?
Yeah, I just want that sense of like, oh, maybe it feels nice to be wanted.
Exactly, right. And yeah, no offense to anyone who wants to do that. And again, it might be something that you do want. You might value, you know, those big interactions with people. And if that's you, then by all means, go do it. But it's just about knowing whether it is or whether you're just doing it because, you know, you want to fit in, basically.
Yeah. No, that's huge. Very, 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 very huge. So as we just slip into the next question here, is Well, the question is, um, what what have you found? So more about you now, because that's done and dusted. We're all philosophical out and we're all mindseted up. We're all ready to go. Is that like what is it that you are driving for? Like obviously you've helped people for a very long period of time.
Mhm.
What is it that you now want to achieve when it comes to developing through yourself and then onto others?
Yeah, great question. And I think my 3 words that I come back to every single day are impact at scale, right? Like I've made impacts through personal training, which is very one-to-one, very, it's working with X amount of people. Then it grew a little bit more because I got better at what I did. So I made a more significant impact. Then I went online and made, a little bit of a bigger impact because I was able to work with more people. And now I'm online with a team of coaches, with a podcast, and I'm just trying to make an even bigger impact. And I think I had this conversation before where I was like, what's my purpose? Like, do I need to go start a nonprofit? Do I need to go to the depths of Africa and, contribute to charities like UNICEF? And I was like, maybe that will come. Maybe some type of philanthropy will come in the future. But right now, I genuinely care about this industry, and I care about up leveling the health and well-being of those around people, like around me. And I'm actually quite good at it. So let me channel as much energy in this direction as possible. And right now it feels good, right? And I think the beauty of it and what I resonate with this in relation to training is that, with your training, like you can't say completed it, right? There's always more weight to lift. There's always, some way you can get better cardiovascularly or from a strength perspective. And that's the same thing with this. Like the mission is bigger than me and it could ever be, right? I can't ever say I impacted as many people as possible because of someone's going to be born tomorrow, right? So I like the beauty that it's like a pursuit that I will never quite reach. So that's what it really does for me. And right now it feels very good to move in that direction. So I'm going to continue to do that, but I'm going to hopefully have enough self-awareness to know when that changes and I might need to move direction. Easier said than done.
Yeah. So what in the grand scheme of things at the moment in time, impact at scale, but what does that mean to you? What does that is there figures, tangible targets? Is there things that you think that that is what will be tangible, what will be scale for you?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I'm metrics driven to a degree, but also I like the feeling of progress, right? So as long as I know that each year I'm doing more than last year, and I'm also not, downsizing myself by not setting my goals high enough, then I'm good, because I like just that feeling of like I'm moving in the right direction. It's the pursuit and the progress that's the most important thing. So for me, like from a coaching perspective, it's obviously having more people within our coaching framework, right? And it's like the impact I can have on the coaches that I work with, and then the subsequent impact they can have on the people they work with. And the more we grow, the more lives we impact. And then when I want to reach even more people, that's the podcast, right? That's what I love about it. And I've missed that creative element of me, which, very well that I've always wanted to get back into some form of like YouTube or some creative outlet. Yeah. And the podcast has been the perfect thing for me to do that, because of now, not only do I have the people who want to work with us on a more personal level, I have, I'm in the ears of so many people who are listening, to the wisdom that I want to give to them and impart on them. And that can be in any different area of the world, right? And in a way that's more fulfilling. Like, I'll be honest, like I look at my podcast analytics more than I look at my bank account. Like I'm more excited to see those numbers and those downloads go up than, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, and it would be stupid for me to say that I don't care about money. We all do. But at the end of the day, like, when you know that you're checking that first thing in the morning than anything else, you're onto something.
Yeah, 100%. Because that, if you're doing the opposite, then yeah, well, that would be run by well, you can do, and that'd be great. I think that becomes a finite amount, though, right? Like, there's a reason why businesses and successful individuals chase that purpose as well as profit. Like, you're supposed to do both. It's fine, but there will be a finite amount of profit that will make you feel a certain way and deliver you value within yourself. Like, there's a external validation that you'll get from million, 2 million, 10 million, 100 million, 12 Bitcoins, whatever. then you can do that, and there'll always be a goal. But if you chase money at all points,
then you will lose the value that you set out. For some point, they go in hand, but there's some point when they do spiral off, where you make decisions to get money, or you make decisions to go purpose driven, and that's at that point where when you're waking up and you're looking at the podcast, then you know that you're at least serving that purpose first.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I actually heard from, I don't know if you follow Naval Ravikant, like if anyone's haven't followed, like super wise guy, his content isn't easy to find, but when you do, he's got a podcast with Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss, which I'd highly encourage. And he has like this, ideology that everyone should get rich first, or at least tick their financial boxes, because once you rid yourself of all that financial worries and that anxiety, then you genuinely can do and operate on a level in which is actually important to you, right? And I was like, damn, that's
1,000,000%.
Right. And that's the thing. And that's what, so don't get me wrong, if you're not in a good financial position, strive for that. But funnily enough, and again, without going too deep and talking about surrender here, like the more I've chased the purpose and, chased progress and kind of let go of the financial attachment, the more that's just come back to me. However, the more I've proactively chased finances, it almost seems like more of an effort to get them. It doesn't mean they don't come, but it does feel like you're placing it on a pedestal. Whereas when you push towards that value side of things, you're like, okay, am I making more value? Am I monetizing things in the right, you're still being strategic about it. I found that it comes to me a lot more than it would if I was just chasing the money.
Yeah, it becomes, when it's a side effect of something, it's a less of an importance, which is great, and therefore when you get it, it's almost like a nice surprise as well. But if you go chasing, as with anything, you go chasing an end goal, you get that end goal, there'll always be another one. But it's like, if as a byproduct of your journey towards this purpose, which is infinite, it never fucking finishes. If you've got the right purpose or goal to it towards, then as a byproduct of that, you get X, Y, and Z from that. But 100,000,000% on that element of hitting your financial goals is something that a guy like I'm listening to lots and lots of sports people, lots and lots of business people, and these people all got to the same point when they tapped out their financial resources. Oh, sorry, they tapped out what they could do with their financial resources, not tap the financial out, and they started making dumb fucking decisions. They started hanging out with the wrong crowd. They started making mistakes with their money. Started cheating on their wives. Started buying crazy stuff that they didn't physically need. But what they then realized is at some point is that the money wasn't the thing that they were chasing that was right, and these people are not listened to because they are on a pedestal as something that is, oh yeah, but they're fine, they've got enough money. I wouldn't be the same if I was there. You fucking would do. If you had £100,000,000 coming into your bank account, you are not sipping, tap water. You're drinking Evian. We are drinking Evian anyway, but that's just you. But like, you're not going to McDonald's. You're going to, maybe you go McDonald's once in a while. You go to Nobu, or if you have £100,000,000 coming in, you go and play with Rolexes, and you go and play with an AP, because why would you buy a fossil at 130 quid when you can buy something that's 130k and you've got the resources? Why wouldn't you? And 100%. There will be a point of where you break because of that push on that finances, because it's infinite, and the people around you will drain them, and the things will drain you because it's in that realm of short-term gratification over whatever else you're chasing that. But you have to get to that point. Like for me, I know my number, and I tapped over it, and the change. And we speak about this a lot, me and Kev, quite often, and we did in the podcast. Is like there's two versions of you. One that's running away from something, and then one that's pushing towards something. And I feel like if you don't get your financial tick box or whatever that might be, you're always going to be chasing and running away from it unless you surrender, which is much harder than just working harder. And like, I'm fine with working harder to tick that box and knowing that number now, and it will never change. Like, it's a number that is it's based on your lifestyle. And like, I'm not going to say my number because it doesn't really matter, but like, you can tick that box relatively easy with some hard work. And my standards were low. Northern little small town with Cheshire, with like, very, very minimal like upbringing on like high standards of like no spoon in my mouth type of mentality. So hitting those numbers are really great. And then when you do, you're like, wow, fuck, like I don't go to bed worrying about my bank account, or yeah, I've just bought some new coffee, so a subscription of my coffee, but I didn't look at my bank account before I did that. Or I bought a new t-shirt, or I go to Asda now and I'm like, yeah, I don't really care what I buy. Like it's good. I'm buying the food that I want, and instead of checking the price per gram. And you can still do that. That's absolutely fine. But I feel like once you get to that point and you tick that proverbial box, you can start pushing towards something as opposed to running away from something. If finances are a big anchor for you, which most people, because the world runs on this money, maybe Bitcoin as well, is that you're gonna be able to have to run. You're gonna have to chase it at some point because you can't have a lifestyle that you want or the lifestyle that you feel like you deserve because there's so many choices and there's so much on Instagram, there's so much what other people are doing that you'll chase it, and that's fine to chase it for a while, but you have to know where your box is. And when you tick that, that's when your world starts to open up. That's when you can be more creative. I literally felt it infinitely. Like even though I was working at the other place, when I became over that number, when I finally knew what that was, I ticked the box, and my mornings became flourished with headspace. And it wasn't because I did anything different other than that I took an anchor away that was holding me back.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, dude. And, coming back to what we said earlier, is like, if you've got all of your bandwidth being utilized in like worry and financial stress, and as you said, like the world runs on money, so you have to get yourself into a place and you have to establish what that number is. And if you don't, that's a very big worry. I mean, if we look at why most relationships and marriages break down, most of it is due to financial reasons, right? Like, and then, like you said, once you hit that number and you then can make a choice on what you actually want to do, it's a very, very liberating place to be. But I'll caveat this because I used to hate it when I heard this. When I was just like, yeah, easy for you to say. And like, yeah. And I was just like, because of when you are in the hustle and you're in the grind and you're not making enough money to do that, it sucks to hear people say this. But yeah, I think you've just got to make sure that you do make that a priority first. And I think people skip that. They're like, nope, I want to be led by my passion and my purpose. And, it leads to them actually being very uncomfortable and, not actually being able to fully pursue their passion and purpose. Because like you said, when you operate from a place of abundance instead of a place of lack, there's a very, very big difference on the outcome and kind of the authenticity that you show up with, right? Like I would not have done this free challenge that we're doing with EH coaching at the moment if, we weren't operating from a good place, right? Because I would be like, okay, well, these people, they could be working with us. They could be paid people. Exactly. Yeah. But because we can, because we're in a good place and because we're focused on the mission now, because of that box is ticked, then we can give back, right? Which is ultimately a place where most people want to be. It doesn't matter what domain of life that you want to be in. Like, when you have more, when your cup is full, you can give from your overflow, right?
100%. And I think the 100% agree with you on that. And then a lot of people will be kicking back at the, let's say, for example, if you've not hit your financial target, you perceive your financial target way, way higher than where you are at this moment in time and maybe going to get. They're at those points, let's say if you're not on some sort of ladder to progress, and like, let's say the corporate ladder, if you're here right now and you're 22, you're working for the big four or something like that in the corporate world, in 10 years time, if you give your soul to it, you could earn X, and that's great. And if you want to do that, then you go and chase that, and that's great. 10 years time, you're going to be caking, and that's when you hit your financial target. Then you start being more creative, probably tell them to fuck off and then go and start your own stuff. That's what a lot of people do, right? But if you're here listening to that and you're working in Asda, or you're working like a sales job that is going to be capped by money, then you also then have to think about the stronger element, which is surrender, and think about more about lowering those standards to hit a financial goal of contentment as opposed to an abundance. Which
you go, carry on. Sorry,
I was just more so just like, whilst you could go and chase that and go in different careers and go and do stuff like that, there will be a point of where most people that have those caps that don't hit it, to avoid not because you're not worthy or you can't do it, but it's to avoid the constant striving for that money to be able to get into that zone of creativity, to more contentment, more fulfillment, which comes through driving through purpose of being happy with money. So I think to avoid just that constant wheel, at some point you may need to lower that number.
Or I'm gonna throw out a spanner here because I don't want to miss out the most important part of this. Is like work ethic, right? Like this doesn't happen by accident, right? Like anyone who put themselves in a good position, like you just said you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth, and I was far from it as well. And I, I'm trying to be PG here, but I ate shit for years. Like I grinded, I worked and worked and worked until I got to a place where I could. I spent hours on the gym floor. I had a retail job at 16. Like I understood that I needed to take these stepping stones, and like I don't want people to miss out on the fact that work ethic is probably the biggest part of this, right? Like it's probably one of my highest values as well, in terms of like it almost frustrates me when I can't see people working hard and they have this sense of entitlement. Like it genuinely frustrates me because I know how hard I've conditioned myself to put it as one of my values. And again, coming back to that, like I had to make that choice, right? Like I had to make, the choice that work ethic is one of my values. And then I had to align my actions with it. And like, we saw the post on Instagram that I posted yesterday, the pain of discipline is much harder than the pain of regret. So I will get up in the 5 a.m. in the morning. I will work 18 hours days, right? So let's not miss out this part in which like, and, for me, like, yes, you might want to lower your lifestyle and everything like that, but I don't. I want to work and grind harder until I can get what I wanted to get to. And I think if you approach it with that level of tenacity, which, I probably don't give myself enough credit for, but I've been putting the work in every single damn day. And so I'm where I am today, and hopefully I will be where I am in 5, 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get anything from that. It doesn't matter what realm of life you're in. And if you are fortunate enough to have rich parents or someone who can finance your life, then fantastic. But, if you're not, and I know you and I clearly haven't been, then you've got to back that up with some work ethic. Yeah, I think entitlement is probably one of those things that people might be sitting on a little bit at the moment, and embracing the concept of ownership, embracing the concept of everything in your life is your responsibility, will be probably the most powerful thing you can do for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. Both those variables are key. One is work damn hard if you want more. And the other one is that if you're not prepared to work harder, then accept less.
Yeah,
that's literally it.
You can't be unhappy about the results you don't get with the work you didn't do, right? Or whatever that quote is.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
You got to put the work in.
Yeah, always. Well, that was an absolute pleasure, El. As always, we got to the salt and pepper grinder, and we were able to kind of put across that. So that's really good. Where can people find you? What's the podcast and what's the coaching?
So the best place to find me is on the Simply Fit podcast. It's where the goal of the podcast is to give you simple and actionable takeaways in 30 minutes, right? We cover a training question, nutrition, mindset, and the goal is that you can basically take away something from that podcast every single time you listen. So that's the best place on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever. And then the other places to connect with me best is going to be Instagram, posting daily on there. And then obviously the coaching service is EH Coaching as well, which you'll find very easily by Googling us or on Instagram as well.
Yeah, perfect. And what's just so everyone knows, what is the designated service? What is it that you try and aspire to with all of your clients?
So for us, it's very similar to what you guys are doing at Autonomy as well, in terms of like, we care about getting our clients to the goal, but that's really just one part of the equation. It's 50% of the work we do. The part that we're most passionate about is actually getting them to a place where they can sustain their results long-term and be at a point of self-sufficiency, right? Just like you and I, we don't believe that coaching needs to be done forever. And we also understand that as long as you've got the right habits, techniques, and understandings and behaviors of yourself in place, then you can maintain your results long-term. So, that's a key philosophy of ours, is getting you to the goal, teaching you how to sustain it, and letting you go on your way thereafter, and hopefully living a life of good health and well-being.
100%. Can't agree more. And you're fantastic at what you do as well. So that's great. And you have a great team behind you.
Thank you, mate.
Right. Thank you, guys. And let's see what the next podcast brings, or when this one actually comes out, because I have no clue. Bye, guys.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.